The rain hammered against the windows of the small house in suburban Cleveland, Ohio, each drop echoing the uncertainty that filled every corner of the cramped living room. Sarah Mitchell stood by the window, watching the November storm unleash its fury on the quiet street lined with maple trees, their branches now bare and trembling in the wind. Behind her, cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, some sealed with packing tape, others still open and half filled with the fragments of a life she had tried so hard to rebuild. Her two children, Emma, 7 years old, and Lucas, 5, sat on the worn carpet, their faces reflecting a confusion they were too young to fully understand, but old enough to feel in the pit of their stomachs. 3 days earlier, Sarah had received the eviction notice, not from a landlord, not from a bank, but from her late husband's parents, Richard and Patricia Harrington. The house had technically belonged to them, a fact Sarah had never fully grasped until David, her husband, had died in a construction accident 18 months ago. She had believed, perhaps naively, that family meant something more than property lines and legal documents. She had believed that the love David had for his children would somehow extend through his parents, that they would see Emma and Lucas as extensions of their beloved son. Instead, what she found was cold pragmatism wrapped in thinly veiled disdain. Patricia had always viewed Sarah as beneath their family. David had met Sarah when she was working as a waitress at a diner near the community college, where she was taking evening classes, trying to finish a nursing degree she had started and abandoned twice due to financial constraints. Patricia had made it clear from the beginning that her son deserved someone with a better pedigree, someone who came from money, someone who understood the social circles the Harringtons moved in. But David had loved Sarah with a fierce determination that had overcome his mother's objections, and they had married in a simple ceremony that Patricia had attended with tight lips and disapproving glances. If you're finding this story compelling, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life, and we truly appreciate each and every one of you who takes the time to engage with our content. The accident had changed everything. David had been working on a high-rise project downtown when the scaffolding gave way. The settlement from the construction company had been modest, barely enough to cover the funeral expenses and a few months of basic living costs. Sarah had found work at a local hospital as a nursing assistant, the closest she could get to her dream without the completed degree, but the pay barely covered childcare and groceries. She had been managing, just barely, stretching every dollar until it screamed, but she had been making it work because she had to, because Emma and Lucas depended on her. Richard had shown up at the house on a gray Tuesday afternoon, his silver Mercedes gleaming incongruously against the modest neighborhood backdrop. He had been polite, almost gentle, which had made the message harder to bear. They were selling the house, the market was good, and they needed to liquidate assets. Estate planning, he had called it. They were getting older, thinking about their retirement, about moving to Florida. Sarah had 60 days to find another place. He had handed her the formal notice, printed on expensive letterhead from a downtown law firm, and had left without meeting her eyes. Patricia had called the next day. The conversation had been brief and brutal. She had suggested, in a tone that dripped with false concern, that perhaps Sarah should consider moving back to her own family, wherever they were. The implication was clear. You're not part of our family, you never were, and now that David is gone, there's no reason to pretend otherwise. When Sarah had tried to explain that her mother lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Florida and was barely managing on Social Security, that her father had passed away years ago, Patricia had simply said that these were difficult decisions, but necessary ones, and that she was sure Sarah would figure something out. The 60 days had somehow compressed into 3 weeks. Sarah had looked at apartments, but everything in a safe neighborhood was beyond her budget. The places she could afford were in areas where she would be afraid to let Emma and Lucas play outside, where the schools had metal detectors and the playgrounds had broken equipment and shattered glass. She had applied for housing assistance, but the waiting list was 18 months long. She had reached out to social services, to charities, to anyone who might help, but the resources were stretched thin, and there were always people in more desperate situations, people living in their cars or in shelters, and Sarah still, technically, had a roof over her head, even if it was about to disappear. Emma had noticed the change in her mother. Children always do. The girl had started having nightmares, waking up crying about monsters chasing them from their house. Lucas had become clingy, refusing to go to daycare without a screaming tantrum that left Sarah exhausted before her shift even began. Sarah had tried to maintain normalcy, to keep their routines intact, but the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden, making even simple tasks feel insurmountable. The storm outside intensified, and Sarah watched as a river of water rushed down the gutter, carrying leaves and debris toward the storm drain. She felt like that debris, swept along by forces beyond her control, heading toward an uncertain destination. She had always been a fighter, always been someone who found solutions, but this time the wall seemed to be closing in from every direction, and she could not see a way out. Behind her, Emma was reading a picture book to Lucas, her young voice trying to inject cheer into a story about a brave little bear who found his way home. The irony was not lost on Sarah. Where was home now? Where would they go? She had 3 days left, and she had nowhere to turn. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another text from Patricia, brief and impersonal. Movers scheduled for Saturday morning. Please have everything out by Friday evening. No greeting, no signature, just a cold reminder that time was running out. Sarah closed her eyes and fought back the tears that threatened to spill. She could not break down, not in front of the kids, not now. They needed her to be strong, to be the anchor in the storm, even when she felt like she was drowning. The hospital had been understaffed for weeks, and Sarah had been picking up extra shifts whenever possible, trying to build up some savings, trying to create a buffer that might help them through the transition. But every extra dollar went toward immediate needs. Emma needed new shoes because she had outgrown her old ones. Lucas needed medicine for an ear infection. The car needed an oil change that she had delayed twice already. There was never enough, never a moment to breathe, never a chance to get ahead. She thought about David, about the man who had promised her a lifetime of partnership, of facing challenges together. He had been a dreamer, always talking about the future they would build, the trips they would take, the life they would create for their children. He had worked long hours, sacrificing time with his family to provide for them, believing that the hard work would pay off eventually. And then, in an instant, it had all disappeared, leaving Sarah alone to navigate a world that seemed designed to punish single mothers, to make every step forward feel like climbing a mountain with weights tied to her ankles. The neighborhood where they lived was modest but safe. Emma went to a good elementary school 3 blocks away, a school where she had friends and teachers who knew her name. Lucas was enrolled in a daycare program at the community center where the staff had become like extended family, where he had learned to count and recognize colors and share toys with other children. Moving would mean uprooting them from everything familiar, from the only stability they had known since losing their father. Sarah hated the idea of adding more trauma to their young lives, more loss, more confusion. She had called her supervisor at the hospital earlier that day, asking about additional shifts, about any overtime opportunities, anything that might help. The supervisor, a kind woman named Teresa, who had 3 kids of her own, had listened with sympathy but offered little hope. The budget was tight, hours were being cut rather than extended, and there were already nurses with seniority who were struggling to get enough shifts. Teresa had suggested Sarah look into loan programs, into emergency assistance funds, but those options came with their own complications, their own requirements and waiting periods. The rain began to let up slightly, transitioning from a downpour to a steady drizzle. Sarah turned from the window and looked at her children. Emma had finished the story and was now helping Lucas build a tower with wooden blocks, her small hands guiding his, her voice gentle and encouraging. They were good kids, resilient kids, and they deserved better than this uncertainty, better than a mother who spent her nights lying awake calculating impossible budgets and crying silently into her pillow. She thought about calling Patricia, about pleading one more time, about explaining that they just needed more time, a few more months to figure things out, to find a solution. But she knew it would be futile. Patricia had made her decision, had drawn her line, and nothing Sarah could say would change that. To Patricia, they were an inconvenience, a reminder of a son who had died too young, a financial burden that she no longer wished to carry. The doorbell rang, startling all 3 of them. Sarah glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 7 in the evening, late for visitors, especially on a rainy weeknight. She walked to the door, wiping her eyes quickly, checking the peephole before opening it. Standing on her porch, rain dripping from the hood of his jacket, was Marcus Webb, David's best friend from childhood. Marcus and David had grown up together, had played football together in high school, had been roommates during their first year of college before David had dropped out to work construction. They had remained close throughout the years, and Marcus had been a pallbearer at David's funeral, had delivered a eulogy that had made everyone cry, talking about his friend's kindness and dedication and love for his family. After the funeral, Marcus had checked in occasionally, sending texts, dropping by with groceries once or twice, but Sarah had always insisted she was managing, not wanting to burden anyone else with her problems. She opened the door and Marcus looked at her with concerned eyes. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of working as a firefighter, with kind eyes that always seemed to see more than people wanted to reveal. "Sarah," he said quietly, "can I come in?" She stepped aside and he entered, shaking the rain from his jacket. Emma and Lucas ran over to greet him. Marcus was Uncle Marcus to them, and they loved when he visited because he always brought energy and laughter, always got down on the floor to play with them, always made them feel special. He hugged them both, lifting Lucas into the air and making him giggle, then turned his attention to the boxes stacked around the room. Moving day? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. Sarah felt her defenses crumble. She had been holding it together for days, weeks, projecting strength she did not feel. But something about Marcus's presence, about having another adult who had loved David, who understood what they had lost, broke through her carefully constructed walls. "We're being evicted," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Richard and Patricia are selling the house. We have 3 days." Marcus's jaw tightened. He had never particularly liked David's parents, had always thought they were cold and judgmental, but he had kept his opinions to himself out of respect for his friend. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, the words tasting bitter. "I've been looking, but everything I can afford is either too far from Emma's school or in neighborhoods that aren't safe. I've applied for assistance, but there are waiting lists for everything. I've been trying to save, but there's never enough, and time just ran out." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his mind working through something. Then he said, "Pack what you need for tonight. You and the kids are coming home with me." Sarah started to protest, started to say she could not impose, that they would figure something out, but Marcus held up his hand. "David was my brother in every way that mattered," he said firmly. "If he were here, he would have done the same for my family without hesitation. You're not imposing. You're accepting help from someone who loves you and those kids and wants to make sure you're safe. Now, pack a bag and let's get out of here before this rain gets worse." The tears Sarah had been holding back finally spilled over. She nodded, unable to speak, and went to gather clothes and toiletries while Marcus entertained the children. Within 30 minutes, they had loaded Sarah's old Honda Civic with essentials, and Marcus led them through the rainy streets to his house in a nearby neighborhood. Marcus lived in a modest 2-story home that he had bought a few years earlier, a fixer-upper that he had been gradually renovating in his spare time. He was single, dedicated to his work at the fire station, and his house reflected the organized efficiency of someone who lived alone but was always prepared for emergencies. He showed Sarah and the kids to the guest room upstairs, a space he admitted he rarely used, but that had 2 twin beds and a chest of drawers that would work for now. The kids were tired, and Sarah got them ready for bed while Marcus made sandwiches in the kitchen. Emma had asked where they were, why they were at Uncle Marcus's house, and Sarah had explained as gently as she could that they were going to stay here for a little while, that it was like a sleepover, that everything was going to be okay. Emma had nodded, wanting to believe her mother, and had climbed into bed with her worn, stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. Lucas had fallen asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the day's emotions. Sarah came downstairs to find Marcus, sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of tea. He gestured for her to sit, and she did, wrapping her cold hands around the warm ceramic. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done." "You would have figured it out," Marcus said. "You're one of the strongest people I know, but you don't have to do it alone." He paused, then continued, "I've been thinking about something. I have space here, obviously. The guest room? And I could convert the basement into another living area. It's not fancy, but it's warm and safe, and the school district is good. Stay here. Take your time to get on your feet, to save money, to figure out your next step without the pressure of a deadline hanging over your head." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "Marcus, I can't. You've already done so much, and I can't just move in and take over your life. You have your own routine, your own space." "My routine is work and sleep and the occasional hockey game on TV," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Trust me. Having some life in this house would be good for me. And before you worry about being a burden, let me be clear. I'm offering this because I want to. David was my best friend, and I miss him every single day. Helping his family, making sure his kids are safe and happy, that's something I can do to honor his memory. So please, let me do this." The weight that had been pressing on Sarah's chest for weeks began to lift slightly. She had been so focused on not being a burden, on handling everything herself, that she had forgotten what it felt like to accept help, to allow someone else to share the load. "I'll pay rent," she insisted, "and I'll help with groceries and utilities. I won't just freeload." "We'll figure out the details," Marcus said. "But first, let's just get you settled. Tomorrow we can go back and get the rest of your things before Richard's movers show up. Tonight, just rest. You're safe here." Sarah felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the desperate tears of earlier. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of the overwhelming emotion that comes when someone extends a hand exactly when you need it most. She reached across the table and squeezed Marcus's hand. "Thank you," she said again, the words inadequate but sincere. "Thank you so much." Over the following weeks, a new routine emerged. Sarah and the kids settled into Marcus's home, and what could have been awkward became surprisingly natural. Marcus worked 24-hour shifts at the fire station, which meant he was gone for extended periods but then home for long stretches. Sarah adjusted her hospital schedule to complement his, and between them, they created a patchwork of childcare that worked. Emma continued at her school, and Lucas enrolled in a daycare program closer to Marcus's house, one that came recommended by other firefighters' families. The basement conversion project became a family affair. Marcus taught Emma and Lucas basic safety rules while he worked, and they helped by handing him tools and cleaning up sawdust. Sarah painted walls on her days off, choosing cheerful colors that made the space feel warm and inviting. What had been a dark storage area gradually transformed into a cozy living space with a small kitchenette, a bathroom, and enough room for a couch and television. Marcus insisted it was an investment in his home value, but Sarah knew he was doing it for them, creating a space where they could have privacy and independence while still being part of a larger household. The financial pressure eased gradually. Without the immediate crisis of homelessness looming, Sarah could focus on longer-term planning. She enrolled in online courses to finish her nursing degree, studying late at night after the kids were asleep, determined to improve their situation through education and advancement. Marcus refused to accept more than a nominal contribution for rent, insisting that having them there was helping him with household expenses anyway, that shared groceries and utilities were actually cheaper than living alone. Emma and Lucas thrived in the new environment. Marcus became a genuine uncle figure, someone who showed up for school events, who taught Lucas how to throw a baseball, who helped Emma with her science projects. He was patient and kind, never trying to replace their father, but honoring David's memory by being present in their lives. On weekends, they would have movie nights with popcorn, or Marcus would take them to the park, pushing Lucas on the swings, while Emma climbed the jungle gym, their laughter filling the air. 6 months after moving in, Sarah received a letter from Patricia. It was formal and brief, informing her that the house had sold, and enclosed was a check for $5,000. Patricia wrote that this represented Emma and Lucas's share of the estate, a portion of the proceeds from the sale. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the hardship they had endured, just a cold transaction completing the legal obligation. Sarah stared at the check for a long time, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. This was what her children's relationship with their grandparents had been reduced to, a dollar amount on a piece of paper. But then she looked around Marcus's house, at the photos on the walls that now included pictures of Emma and Lucas, at the kitchen table where they had shared countless meals, at the living room where they had built pillow forts and played board games, and she realized something important. Family was not about blood or legal documents or property. Family was about showing up, about being present, about loving people through their hardest moments and celebrating with them during their best ones. Marcus had become family in the truest sense, and the Harringtons had proven they were strangers who happened to share DNA. She deposited the check and put it toward her nursing school tuition. Education was the path forward, the way to ensure her children would have opportunities, that they would never be at the mercy of people who valued property over relationships. Every night, after tucking Emma and Lucas into bed, she would study, pushing through exhaustion, determined to create a better future. Marcus noticed her dedication and respected it. On nights when she had important exams, he would take the kids to the fire station with him, giving them tours and letting them sit in the truck, making them feel special while giving Sarah the quiet space she needed to focus. His colleagues at the station grew to know the family, and several of their wives reached out to Sarah, offering support and friendship, inviting her to gatherings, making sure she knew she was not alone. One evening, nearly a year after they had moved in, Sarah came home from a particularly difficult shift at the hospital to find Marcus in the kitchen, cooking dinner. Emma was setting the table, carefully placing forks and napkins at each spot, while Lucas was coloring at the counter, his tongue sticking out in concentration. It was such a normal scene, such a picture of domestic stability, that Sarah paused in the doorway, overwhelmed by gratitude. Marcus looked up and smiled. "Rough day?" he asked, reading her expression. "A long day," she corrected, "but coming home to this makes it better." "Well, you're just in time. I'm attempting lasagna, and I make no promises about the outcome, but the kids assured me that even if it's terrible, we have ice cream for backup." Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that felt good in her chest. She joined them in the kitchen, and together they finished preparing dinner. As they sat down to eat, Emma said grace, something she had learned at school and insisted on doing before meals. She thanked God for their food, for their home, for Uncle Marcus, and for keeping them safe. When she finished, Lucas added his own prayer, "And thank you for making us a family." Marcus caught Sarah's eye across the table, and she saw the emotion there, the understanding that this little boy had just articulated something profound and true. They had become a family, not through blood or marriage or legal documents, but through choice and commitment and love. It was different from what Sarah had imagined her life would be, different from the dreams she and David had shared, but it was real and solid and good. The nursing program was demanding, requiring clinical hours and intensive study, but Sarah persevered. She had failed before, let life's obstacles derail her dreams, but this time was different. This time she had support, a stable home, and a fierce determination born from having stared into the abyss and found her way back. Marcus rearranged his schedule when he could to accommodate her clinical rotations, and on the weeks when their schedules clashed, he enlisted help from his fire station family, creating a network of support that ensured Emma and Lucas were always cared for. 2 years after that rainy November night when they had been forced to leave, Sarah walked across the stage in a rented cap and gown and received her nursing degree. Emma and Lucas sat in the audience with Marcus, who had taken the day off to be there. When Sarah's name was called, they stood and cheered, Lucas waving a homemade sign that said, "We love you, Mom," in crayon letters. Sarah accepted her diploma with tears streaming down her face, tears of pride and relief and joy. The degree translated into a better position at the hospital, a significant pay increase, and benefits that gave her security she had never had before. She began saving in earnest, not just for emergencies now, but for the future. She wanted to buy a home someday, a place that would truly be theirs, but there was no rush. Marcus's house had become home in the ways that mattered, and he had made it clear they could stay as long as they wanted. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah was folding laundry in the living room when the doorbell rang. Marcus was at the store with the kids, so she answered it alone. Standing on the porch was Richard Harrington. He looked older than she remembered, more fragile, and his face carried an expression she could not quite read. "Sarah," he said quietly, "may I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. Richard entered slowly, looking around the house with curious eyes. She offered him coffee, which he accepted, and they sat in the living room in awkward silence while she prepared it. When she returned with 2 mugs, Richard took his with a quiet thank you and said, "I owe you an apology." Sarah waited, saying nothing. "Patricia and we handled everything wrong," he continued, his voice heavy with regret. "After David died, we were drowning in our own grief, and we made decisions that hurt you and the children. We told ourselves we were being practical, that we were doing what was necessary, but the truth is we were running away from pain. Seeing you and Emma and Lucas reminded us of what we had lost. Instead of leaning into that, instead of holding onto the family we still had, we pushed you away." He paused, staring into his coffee. "Patricia is not well. She had a stroke last month, and it's made her face some truths she had been avoiding. She asked me to come here, to try to make amends. She wants to see the children, wants to be part of their lives, if you will allow it." Sarah felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Anger at the pain they had caused, sadness for the time lost, but also a recognition that holding on to resentment would only poison her own life. "I need to think about it," she said honestly. "Emma and Lucas barely remember you. To them, family is the people who show up, who are present. If Patricia wants to be part of their lives, it can't be on her terms and her schedule. It has to be consistent, genuine. They've been hurt enough." "I understand," Richard said, "and I don't expect forgiveness. Not immediately, maybe not ever. But I wanted you to know that we were wrong. You are a remarkable mother, and David would be so proud of how you've cared for his children. I wish we had seen that sooner." After Richard left, Sarah sat for a long time processing the conversation. When Marcus returned with the kids, arms full of grocery bags and laughter, she told him about the visit. Marcus listened carefully, then said, "Whatever you decide, I support you. But don't let them back in unless they have truly changed. Emma and Lucas don't need people who are only around when it's convenient." Sarah nodded, knowing he was right. Over the following weeks, Richard called several times, and eventually, Sarah agreed to a supervised visit at a local park. Patricia came in a wheelchair, weakened by her stroke, but with eyes that held genuine remorse. She brought small gifts for the children, nothing extravagant, just thoughtful toys that showed she had tried to learn about their interests. Emma was cautious, but polite, while Lucas, ever open-hearted, climbed onto Patricia's lap and showed her his toy dinosaur. The visits continued, slowly building a bridge that had been burned. Sarah set clear boundaries, insisting on consistency and respect, and to her surprise, Richard and Patricia honored them. They began attending Emma's school events, bringing flowers and proud smiles. They took Lucas to the zoo and sent Sarah pictures of his face lit up with joy in front of the elephant exhibit. It was not perfect, not the relationship it could have been if they had acted differently from the beginning, but it was something, a chance for healing. The transformation in Patricia was the most striking. The stroke had left her with limited mobility on her left side, requiring physical therapy 3 times a week, but it had also seemed to strip away the pretense and judgment that had defined her for so long. During one visit, she asked Sarah if they could talk privately while Richard took the children to get ice cream from a nearby truck. They sat on a park bench under a large oak tree, the summer heat tempered by a gentle breeze. Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she spoke, whether from the stroke or emotion, Sarah could not tell. "I have been thinking a lot about the kind of person I was," Patricia began, her voice quieter than Sarah had ever heard it. When David was growing up, I had such specific ideas about what his life should look like. I wanted him to marry into a certain kind of family, to have a certain kind of career, to move in certain social circles. I thought those things mattered. I thought they defined success. She paused, watching Emma and Lucas in the distance, their faces bright with excitement as they chose their ice cream flavors. When he chose you, I saw it as a rebellion, as him throwing away his potential. I was so focused on what I thought he deserved that I never stopped to see what he actually wanted, what actually made him happy. And after he died, I was so angry. Angry at the universe, angry at the construction company, angry at God, and some of that anger, I am ashamed to say, I directed at you. Sarah listened, her own emotions complex and layered. Part of her wanted to interrupt, to tell Patricia how much pain her actions had caused, but another part recognized the courage it took for this proud woman to admit her failures. I told myself we were selling the house for practical reasons, Patricia continued, but the truth was I could not bear to drive by and see you there, to be reminded every day of what we had lost. I thought if I could just remove the reminders, the pain would lessen. But it did not. It only grew worse, and I added guilt to the grief. When I had the stroke, lying in that hospital bed, I realized I might die without ever making things right, without ever knowing my grandchildren. That terrified me more than death itself. Tears rolled down Patricia's cheeks, and Sarah found herself reaching out, taking the older woman's hand. It was a gesture of compassion, not absolution, but it was a start. Emma and Lucas deserve to know you, Sarah said quietly. The real you, not the version that values appearances over people. If you can be that person, we can try to build something. But you have to understand, they have Marcus. He showed up when no one else did. He is family to them in ways that cannot be replaced or diminished. I know, Patricia said, squeezing Sarah's hand weakly, and I am grateful to him. He did what we should have done. He honored David's memory by caring for David's family. I cannot change the past, Sarah, but I hope I can be part of their future, even if it is just a small part. The reconciliation was gradual and required work from everyone. Richard began video calling once a week, reading bedtime stories to Lucas over the phone, his gentle voice carrying through the speaker as Lucas snuggled into his blankets. Patricia, despite her physical limitations, started a tradition of sending the children letters, handwritten notes filled with encouragement and questions about their lives, small drawings in the margins that showed she was trying to connect with them on their level. For her part, Sarah worked through her own resentment in therapy sessions she had started attending. Marcus had suggested it, had even helped her find a therapist who specialized in grief and family trauma. The sessions were difficult, forcing Sarah to confront not just her anger at the Harringtons, but her own fears about stability, her tendency to try to control everything because she was afraid of losing control, her deep-seated belief that she had to handle everything alone because asking for help meant admitting weakness. The therapist, Dr. Chen, was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a direct manner that Sarah appreciated. Trauma changes how we see the world, Dr. Chen explained during one session. When you lost David and then lost your home, your brain learned that the world is fundamentally unsafe, that people cannot be relied upon. Even though Marcus has proven otherwise, that old programming is still running in the background, making you hypervigilant, making you afraid to fully trust. Sarah recognized the truth in those words. Even living with Marcus, even seeing his consistency day after day, part of her was always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to announce he was tired of them, that they needed to leave. It was exhausting, this constant state of waiting for disaster. What if, Dr. Chen suggested gently, you tried trusting that things might actually work out? Not blind trust, but informed trust, based on evidence. Marcus has shown you who he is for years now. Maybe it is time to believe him. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about trust and evidence and the stories we tell ourselves. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of settling wood. She thought about David, about the trust she had placed in him, how his death had shattered her sense of safety. She thought about the Harringtons, about how their betrayal had reinforced the lesson that people would let you down when you needed them most. And she thought about Marcus, about the countless ways he had shown up, not with grand gestures, but with steady, reliable presence. The next morning, over coffee while the kids were still sleeping, Sarah told Marcus about her therapy session, about her struggle with trust. He listened, as he always did, with full attention. I know I have been holding back, she admitted, keeping one foot out the door emotionally, even though we have been living here for years, and I am sorry for that. You have done nothing to deserve my mistrust. Marcus set down his coffee mug and looked at her with those steady eyes that had seen her through so many crises. Sarah, I understand why you feel that way. You have been through hell, and your brain is trying to protect you from going through it again. You do not owe me an apology for that. What you do owe yourself is the chance to be happy, to feel secure, to believe that good things can last. "How do you do it?" Sarah asked. "How do you stay so steady when everything around us is chaos?" "I am not always steady," Marcus said with a slight smile. "You just do not see the moments when I am not. But I learned something working as a firefighter. You cannot control the fire. You can prepare, you can train, you can have the right equipment, but ultimately you cannot control what happens. What you can control is how you respond, whether you run toward the crisis or away from it. I choose to run toward it, and I choose to run toward the people I love because that is what makes life worth living." His words settled into Sarah's chest, warm and solid. She reached across the table and took his hand, and this time she let herself fully feel the gratitude, the connection, the trust that had been building between them for years. "Thank you," she said simply, "for running toward us." As autumn arrived again, painting the Cleveland suburbs in shades of gold and crimson, Emma started middle school. It was a big transition, one that came with new anxieties and challenges. She was self-conscious about her clothes, worried that they were not as nice as what the other girls wore. She stressed about fitting in, about making friends, about navigating the complex social hierarchies that seemed to emerge overnight among sixth graders. Sarah noticed her daughter's anxiety and felt the familiar pang of guilt, the feeling that she was not providing enough, that Emma was suffering because of their financial limitations. But when she mentioned it to Marcus, he had a different perspective. "Emma is learning resilience," he said. "She is learning that her worth is not determined by brand names or popularity." Those are valuable lessons, even if they are hard to learn. He was right, but Sarah still wanted to ease her daughter's pain. She took Emma shopping at a thrift store, teaching her how to find quality pieces, how to mix and match to create outfits that looked put together. Emma was skeptical at first, but as they sorted through racks, finding unexpected treasures, her mood lifted. They came home with bags full of clothes that cost less than one new outfit would have, and Emma tried on different combinations, her face lighting up as she discovered her own style. Lucas, now 7, was dealing with his own challenges. He had been struggling in school, having difficulty focusing and completing assignments. His teacher had suggested testing for ADHD, a suggestion that Sarah initially resisted. She did not want her son labeled, did not want him on medication, but doctor? Chen encouraged her to at least get the evaluation, to have information rather than assumptions. The testing revealed that Lucas did indeed have ADHD, primarily inattentive type. The psychologist explained that it was not a character flaw or a discipline problem, but a neurological difference in how his brain processed information and regulated attention. With proper support, including some modifications at school and possibly medication, Lucas could thrive. Sarah cried in the car after the appointment, overwhelmed by one more thing to manage, one more way she felt she was failing her children. But when she got home, Marcus helped her reframe it. "This is not a failure," he said firmly. "This is information. Now you know what Lucas needs and you can advocate for him. That is good parenting, not bad parenting." They worked together to implement the recommendations. Marcus helped create a structured homework routine, using timers and breaks, turning assignments into manageable chunks. Sarah worked with the school to get a 504 plan in place, ensuring Lucas received appropriate accommodations. They tried medication, a low dose that helped Lucas focus without changing his personality, and celebrated when his grades improved and his confidence grew. Through these challenges, the household found its rhythm. There were still hard days, still moments of stress and worry, but there were also countless moments of joy. Movie nights where they argued good-naturedly about what to watch, Marcus advocating for action films while Emma rolled her eyes and pushed for comedies. Sunday morning pancake breakfasts, where Lucas helped flip them, giggling when he inevitably made a mess. Holidays celebrated with a mix of old traditions and new ones they created together. Thanksgiving that year, Sarah decided to host dinner for the first time. She invited Richard and Patricia, as well as Marcus's parents, who flew in from Arizona. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but Sarah wanted to do it, wanted to show everyone what they had built. The house was full of voices and laughter, the kitchen fragrant with roasting turkey and fresh-baked pies. Patricia arrived with Richard, her physical therapy having improved her mobility enough that she used only a cane now instead of a wheelchair. She brought a family recipe for sweet potato casserole, something David had loved as a child. And she worked alongside Sarah in the kitchen, their conversation stilted at first, but gradually becoming more natural. Marcus's mother, Linda, was a warm woman who immediately started doting on Emma and Lucas, showing them pictures of Marcus as a child and telling embarrassing stories that made him groan good-naturedly. As they sat around the table, plates piled high with food, Marcus asked everyone to share what they were thankful for. Emma talked about her new friends at school. Lucas mentioned his improved grades. Richard spoke about second chances, his voice thick with emotion. Patricia thanked them for allowing her back into their lives. Linda expressed gratitude for the beautiful family her son had found. When it was Sarah's turn, she looked around the table at these people who had become her family. Some by blood, some by choice, all by love. I am thankful for this, she said simply, gesturing to encompass the room, the moment, the imperfect but beautiful reality they had created together. I am thankful that we found each other when we needed each other most. I am thankful for people who show up, who stay, who love us through the hard parts. That is everything. Marcus met her eyes across the table and smiled. And in that smile, Sarah saw understanding and shared history in a future that felt for the first time secure. They had started as a widow, and her children seeking shelter from a storm, and a man honoring his friend's memory. They had become something more, something neither of them had planned, but both had needed. Winter came with its typical Cleveland ferocity, bringing snow that piled high against windows and required constant shoveling. Marcus taught Emma and Lucas how to shovel properly, to lift with their legs instead of their backs, and turned the chore into a game, racing to see who could clear their section of the driveway first. They built snowmen in the front yard, an entire family of them, complete with carrot noses and button eyes borrowed from Marcus's sewing kit. One particularly cold January evening, the power went out during a storm. The house went dark and silent, the heater stopping mid-cycle. Marcus immediately went into emergency mode, pulling out flashlights and blankets, starting a fire in the fireplace that he kept maintained for exactly these situations. They huddled together in the living room, the flickering firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Lucas was scared at first, worried about the darkness and the cold, but Marcus turned it into an adventure. He told stories about calls he had responded to at the fire station, toning down the scary parts but keeping the excitement, teaching the kids about safety and bravery. Emma shared ghost stories she had learned at school, making her voice spooky and dramatic. Sarah contributed memories of David, stories the children were too young to remember, keeping their father alive through words and laughter. As the evening wore on and the children grew sleepy, their heads drooping against shoulders and laps, Sarah looked at Marcus across the firelight. "You did not sign up for this," she said quietly. "When you offered us a place to stay, you probably thought it would be temporary, a few months at most. You have given us years of your life, your space, your peace and quiet." Marcus poked at the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. "You are right, I did not sign up for this," he said, and Sarah felt her heart clench. But then he continued, "I signed up for something so much better. I signed up for a family. I signed up for coming home to noise and laughter instead of an empty house. I signed up for purpose and connection and love. If you think I have been sacrificing, you are wrong. I have been receiving." "But do you ever want your own family?" Sarah asked, voicing a fear she had carried for a long time. "We have been here so long, taking up your space, your time. What about dating, about finding someone, about having kids of your own?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, his face thoughtful in the firelight. "I have thought about that," he admitted. "And maybe someday I will meet someone, fall in love, all of that. But, Sarah, you need to understand something. This," he gestured to encompass the room, the sleeping children, the warmth they had created together, "this is not preventing me from having a family. This is family. Maybe it looks different from what I imagined, but it is real, and it matters, and I would not trade it for anything." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I love you," she said, and then quickly clarified, seeing his expression shift. "Not romantically, but as family. You are family to us, Marcus. You are the person I call when something breaks or when something wonderful happens. You are the person my kids run to when they are excited or scared. You are family in the truest sense." "I love you too," Marcus said, his voice warm. "All of you. You are my family." The power came back on around midnight, the sudden brightness jarring after hours of firelight, but they stayed where they were, too comfortable to move, too content to break the spell of the evening. Spring brought new beginnings. Sarah received a promotion at the hospital, moving into a leadership role that came with increased responsibility and better pay. She was now supervising a team of nurses, putting into practice the skills she had learned not just in school, but through lived experience, through managing her household, through advocating for her children. Her colleagues respected her, appreciating her competence and compassion, her ability to remain calm during emergencies while never losing sight of the human element of healthcare. The increased income meant Sarah could finally save in earnest toward a goal she had been nurturing secretly, buying a home. Not to leave Marcus, but to have something that was truly theirs, a place where Emma and Lucas could feel ownership and stability. She wanted to stay in the neighborhood, wanted to maintain the life they had built, but she also wanted to stand on her own 2 feet financially, to prove to herself that she could. She mentioned it to Marcus one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction. To her surprise, he was enthusiastic. "That is fantastic," he said genuinely. "You have worked so hard, and you deserve to have something that is yours. And honestly, knowing you will be nearby, that the kids will still be close, that makes it even better." We will still be family, just with an extra front door between us. Over the following months, Sarah worked with a real estate agent, looking at houses within a 5-block radius of Marcus's home. She wanted something small, but with enough room for the kids to have their own spaces as they grew into teenagers. She wanted a yard where they could play, a kitchen where she could cook, a place they could make their own. Emma and Lucas were excited about the prospect of their own house, though Lucas worried about leaving Uncle Marcus. "We will still see him all the time," Sarah assured him. "He will be just down the street. You can ride your bike to his house and he can come over for dinner. Nothing important is changing." In early summer, Sarah found it, a modest 3-bedroom bungalow 4 blocks from Marcus's house. It needed some work, a new roof and updated plumbing, but it had good bones and a fenced backyard perfect for a dog, something the kids had been begging for. The price was at the very top of her budget, but her credit had improved significantly over the past few years, and with the down payment she had saved, she could make it work. The day they closed on the house, Marcus took them out to celebrate. They went to a local restaurant the kids loved, one with a game room and pizza they all agreed was the best in Cleveland. As they sat in a booth, Sarah showed Emma and Lucas the keys to their new home, watching their faces light up with excitement. "Can we paint my room purple?" Emma asked immediately. "Can we get a dog?" Lucas chimed in. "We can talk about all of it," Sarah laughed, overwhelmed with emotion. This house represented so much more than just a place to live. It represented stability, achievement, independence. It represented the journey from that desperate night years ago when they had nowhere to go, to this moment when they had options, when they had a future. Marcus raised his glass of soda in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, "and to family, wherever we live." They clinked glasses, and Sarah felt a completeness she had not known was possible. The moving process was bittersweet. Sarah and the kids had lived in Marcus's house for over 4 years, and it had become home in every sense that mattered. As they packed boxes, they found reminders of the life they had built there. Crayon drawings taped inside closets, growth marks penciled on a doorframe, a crack in the kitchen tile from when Lucas had dropped a can of soup. Marcus helped them pack and move, enlisting his firefighter buddies who showed up with trucks and muscle and good humor. They made quick work of the furniture, and by early evening, everything was in the new house, boxes stacked in rooms waiting to be unpacked. The house felt empty and full of potential, echoing with possibility. Through it all, Marcus remained the constant. He celebrated Sarah's achievements, supported her decisions, and loved Emma and Lucas with an uncle's fierce devotion. He never asked for recognition, never pointed out all he had done, but his actions spoke louder than words ever could. He had opened his home and his heart when they had nowhere else to turn, and he had proven that family was built through action and commitment, not just shared genetics. That first night in the new house, after Marcus and his friends had left, after the pizza boxes had been cleared away and the kids had been put to bed in sleeping bags because their beds were not yet assembled, Sarah walked through the empty rooms. Moonlight streamed through bare windows, casting rectangles of silver light on the hardwood floors. She ran her hand along the walls, feeling the texture of the paint, the solidity of the structure. This was hers. She had done this. A girl who had started as a waitress, who had dropped out of nursing school twice, who had been widowed and homeless and desperate, now owned a home. She had not done it alone, could never have done it alone, but she had done it. And that mattered. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Sarah took time off work to unpack and organize, to turn the house into a home. Emma chose purple paint for her room, a deep lavender that made the space feel cozy and personal. Lucas wanted blue, bright as the sky, and Sarah painted both rooms while they were at school, wanting to surprise them. Marcus came over nearly every day, helping with the projects that required more skill than Sarah possessed. He installed new light fixtures, fixed a leaky faucet, reinforced a wobbly stair railing. He did not do it because he had to, but because he wanted to, because that was who he was. Sarah insisted on paying him, at least for materials, and they settled into a pattern of shared labor, of friends helping friends, of family taking care of family. The neighborhood welcomed them. Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived next door, brought over a casserole and a plate of homemade cookies, introducing herself with a warm smile. The family across the street, the Johnsons, had kids close to Emma and Lucas's ages, and within days, the children were riding bikes together, their laughter filling the quiet street. Sarah felt embraced by this community, felt the safety of being known and accepted. 6 weeks after moving in, Sarah kept her promise and took Emma and Lucas to the animal shelter. They spent hours looking at dogs, playing with different ones in the meet and greet room, trying to find the right fit. Lucas fell in love with an elderly beagle named Charlie, who had sad eyes and a gentle disposition. Emma preferred an energetic terrier mix who bounced around like she had springs in her legs. Unable to decide, Sarah suggested they sleep on it, come back the next day with clear heads. That night, lying in her own bed in her own house, Sarah thought about the decision. The beagle would be easier, calmer, lower energy, but the terrier needed them more. She was younger, more adoptable to some families, but also more work. By morning, Sarah knew which dog belonged with them. They went back to the shelter and adopted the terrier, whom Lucas immediately renamed Pepper because of her black and white spotted coat. Pepper brought new chaos to the house. She chewed shoes and dug holes in the backyard and barked at squirrels with unbridled enthusiasm. She also brought joy, curling up next to the kids when they read, greeting them with ecstatic wiggles when they came home from school, providing unconditional love that helped heal old wounds. Marcus laughed when he met Pepper, crouching down to let her lick his face, telling Sarah she had chosen well, that every family needed a little chaos to keep things interesting. As summer faded into fall again, Sarah established new routines in the new house. She hosted her first dinner party, inviting Marcus and his parents, Richard and Patricia, and a few colleagues from the hospital. It was nerve-wracking, wanting everything to be perfect. But as people arrived and filled her home with conversation and laughter, Sarah relaxed into the role of hostess. Patricia brought flowers, beautiful autumn mums in shades of orange and yellow. She moved slowly through the house, admiring the decor, complimenting Sarah's taste. At one point, she pulled Sarah aside in the kitchen and said quietly, "You have built a beautiful life. David would be so proud of you." It was the first time Patricia had said his name without pain clouding her features, and Sarah felt something shift between them, a healing that had taken years but was finally happening. The dinner was a success. Marcus told stories that had everyone laughing. Linda shared family recipes with Sarah. Richard played chess with Emma, who was learning the game at school and eager to practice. Lucas showed everyone his room, proudly displaying his artwork that Sarah had framed and hung on the walls. As Sarah watched her home filled with people she loved, people who loved her children, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and accomplishment. That winter, Emma turned 13. The transition to teenager came with new challenges, mood swings that seemed to appear from nowhere, a sudden self-consciousness about her appearance, friendship drama that left her crying in her room. Sarah navigated these waters as best she could, drawing on memories of her own teenage years, seeking advice from other mothers at the hospital. Marcus proved invaluable during this time. He had a way of talking to Emma that bypassed her defensiveness. When she was upset about something, he would invite her to help him with a project, and while they worked side by side, she would open up, sharing fears and frustrations she would not tell her mother. He never judged, never dismissed her feelings, just listened and offered perspective when asked. One evening, Emma came home from school devastated because a group of girls had excluded her from a party. Sarah's instinct was to call the other mothers, to fix it, to protect her daughter from pain, but Marcus suggested a different approach. "Let her feel it," he said gently. "Trying to fix every hurt teaches her that she cannot handle disappointment, but she can. She is stronger than you think." It was hard advice to follow, went against every maternal instinct Sarah had, but she trusted Marcus's judgment. She let Emma be sad, provided comfort but not solutions, and watched as her daughter processed the hurt and came out the other side more resilient. A few weeks later, Emma had found new friends, girls who shared her interests in science and reading, and the party that had seemed so important was forgotten. Lucas continued to thrive with his ADHD management plan. His grades improved steadily, and he discovered a talent for math that surprised everyone. His teacher recommended he be tested for the gifted program, and when the results came back, showing he qualified, Sarah cried tears of pride. The boy she had worried about, who had struggled so much, was excelling. It was proof that with the right support, with people who believed in potential rather than limitations, anything was possible. As spring arrived, bringing with it warming temperatures and blooming flowers, Sarah received unexpected news. The hospital was creating a new position, Director of Nursing Education, responsible for training new nurses and developing continuing education programs for staff. Her supervisor called her into the office and told her she was the top candidate, that her combination of clinical experience, leadership skills, and educational background made her perfect for the role. The position came with a significant salary increase and the opportunity to shape how the next generation of nurses would be trained. It also meant more responsibility, more stress, longer hours during certain periods. Sarah asked for time to think about it, to discuss it with her family, because that was what they were, and their input mattered. That evening, she gathered Emma, Lucas, and Marcus around the dinner table and explained the opportunity. Emma was immediately enthusiastic, proud of her mother, and excited about what this meant. Lucas asked if it meant she would miss his baseball games, a worry Sarah took seriously. Marcus listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions about the time commitment and what support she would need. "I want to do it," Sarah said, "but not if it means sacrificing time with you two." She nodded at her children. "You are my priority, always." "Mom," Emma said with the wisdom of her 13 years, "you have sacrificed so much for us. You deserve this. We will be fine. We have Uncle Marcus. We have routines. We have Pepper to keep us company. You should take the job." Marcus nodded in agreement. Emma is right. This is an incredible opportunity, and you are ready for it. We will make it work as a family, because that is what families do. Sarah accepted the position, and her life entered a new phase. The work was demanding, but fulfilling. She developed training programs that emphasized both clinical skills and compassionate care, drawing on her own experiences to teach others. She mentored young nurses, helping them navigate the challenges of the profession, becoming for them what others had been for her, a guide, a supporter, someone who believed in their potential. The increased income meant more financial security, the ability to save for the kids' college funds, to take a real vacation for the first time in years. That summer, Sarah planned a trip to Washington, D.C., wanting Emma and Lucas to see the monuments, to learn history in person. Marcus took time off to join them, and for a week, they explored the nation's capital together, taking pictures at the Lincoln Memorial, touring the Smithsonian museums, eating overpriced ice cream, and making memories that would last a lifetime. And one evening in D.C., after the kids were asleep in the hotel room, Sarah and Marcus sat on the balcony looking out at the city lights. "Thank you," Sarah said, not for the first time, but meaning it just as deeply as always, for all of this, for making it possible. Marcus shook his head. "You made it possible, Sarah. You worked harder than anyone I know. You refused to give up, refused to let circumstances define you. I just provided a stable place to land while you figured it out." "You provided more than that," Sarah insisted. "You provided family. You showed my kids what it means to be a good man, to keep your promises, to show up consistently. You cannot know how valuable that is, especially for Lucas, to have a male role model who is present and kind and reliable." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Marcus said, "I have been thinking about something. I have been at the fire station for 15 years now, and I am eligible for a promotion to captain. It would mean more leadership, less time on the trucks, more administrative work. Part of me wants it, the challenge and responsibility. But part of me worries about what it would mean for our arrangement, for the time I spend with Emma and Lucas." "You should do it," Sarah said immediately. "You have worked just as hard as I have, and you deserve the recognition. We will adjust, like we always do. Emma and Lucas are older now, more independent. We will make it work." Marcus smiled. "We make a good team," he said simply. "The best team," Sarah agreed. Back in Cleveland, life continued its forward momentum. Emma started high school, a transition that came with new anxieties, but also new opportunities. She joined the science club and the debate team, finding her niche among students who valued intelligence over popularity. She made a close friend named Maya, a girl with a sharp wit and kind heart, and suddenly the house was filled with the sound of teenage girls laughing, sharing secrets, being young. Lucas entered middle school, that awkward phase of adolescence that is difficult for everyone. He grew several inches in a few months, becoming gangly and uncoordinated, tripping over his own feet. His voice started to change, cracking at unexpected moments that embarrassed him terribly. But he also developed a sly sense of humor, a quick wit that caught everyone off guard and made family dinners entertaining. Marcus did accept the promotion to captain, and while it meant a change in his schedule, it also brought a sense of pride and accomplishment. The ceremony where he received his new badge was attended by Sarah, Emma, and Lucas, who cheered loudly when his name was called. Afterward, they went out to celebrate, and Marcus gave each of the kids a junior firefighter badge, honorary ones that made them beam with pride. Years passed, marked by school plays and birthday parties, by graduations and small victories. Emma grew into a thoughtful teenager who excelled in science and dreamed of becoming a doctor. Lucas developed a love for drawing, filling notebooks with imaginative sketches. Sarah advanced in her nursing career, eventually becoming a charge nurse, a position that came with respect and financial stability. Marcus renovated more of his house, always finding projects that made it more comfortable for all of them. On what would have been David's 45th birthday, the family gathered at his grave. Sarah brought flowers, Emma and Lucas wrote letters they placed by the headstone, and Marcus stood with his hand on Sarah's shoulder, providing silent support. As they stood there in the autumn sunshine, leaves falling gently around them, Sarah reflected on the journey they had taken. They had started with loss and desperation, with a future that seemed impossibly dark, but they had found light through the kindness of someone who had chosen to show up when it mattered most. On the drive home, Lucas asked from the back seat, "Mom, do you think Dad would be happy with how things turned out?" Sarah glanced at Marcus, who was driving, his steady presence as reliable as the sunrise, then turned to look at her children, healthy and loved and full of possibility. "Yes," she said with certainty, "I think he would be very happy. We've built a good life, a life filled with love and people who care about each other. That's what matters most." Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand briefly before returning it to the wheel. No words were necessary. They had weathered the storm together, and they had emerged stronger, bound not by obligation but by genuine affection and mutual respect. The house that Richard and Patricia had forced them from had just been a building, bricks and mortar with no soul. The home they had created with Marcus was something far more valuable, a sanctuary built on love, sacrifice, and the understanding that true family shows up not just in good times, but especially when the darkness threatens to overwhelm you. As they pulled into the driveway, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been hard, marked by tears and fear and uncertainty, but it had led them here, to this moment, to this family, and that made all the struggle worthwhile. She had learned that sometimes the people waiting for you, the ones who catch you when you fall, are not always the ones you expect. Sometimes they are the quiet heroes who step forward without fanfare, who offer help without strings attached, who love without conditions. And sometimes those people become the truest family you could ever hope to have.